cool. Let me just launch into it so we can hopefully get some time to actually run this. What we are going to talk about today is what Thomas Page calls promiscuous combat, or public battle. So it's the idea of fighting multiples, right? Right now, most of HEMA, we engage in a 1v1, and that's good. There's lots of excellent data there. That's also a historical context, the duel. But there was this other context of open field combat against multiples. There was the context of getting jumped and having to defend yourself with a sword. There is a group of gentlemen who have been working on this exact problem in the modern self-defense sphere, and that's ShivWorks, Craig Douglas, Brian Frias. What they do is they build people towards kind of functioning in this in-the-round environment, and they're using sim guns and knives and stuff. We're gonna stick to the historical set, but there's a lot of really solid similarities. So what are the conditions of promiscuous combat? Number one, multiple opponents, obviously. Either the actuality or the potential. I engage with Kieran, Kieran's buddy sees that I'm trying to fight him, and now I'm dealing with a 2v1, right? What are some of the other things? Asymmetric armament, asymmetric initiative. I might have a saber, Kieran might have the small sword, I might be engaging you, Kieran gets the jump on me, right? And so I'm here, oh fuck, and now I'm behind time, right? Does that make sense to everybody? Some other elements, unsure ground, right? We fence in nice shoes on athletic floor. What about doing similar things on wet grass? Or with like your historical shoes on a wet piazza or anything like that, right? The presence of armor. We generally don't do HEMA in a way where we factor in some form of armor, but historically almost everybody wore armor even in their day-to-day basis back in the 16th century. That tapers off as we get into the early modern period, because chainmail bad with gun. Gun chainmail splatters your insides with rings. And then our final issue in promiscuous combat, missile weapons. Kieran may engage with this gentleman, and then I may be over here with a fucking rock and bean Kieran in the head, right? So those are our conditions. So what do we do about it? The first thing we need to do is focus on automaticity. What do I mean by that? You'll note that Spadone combat is all organized in terms of rules, right? So it's not that, go.
The Spadone is like a huge...
Big sword. Big fuck off sword to fight several, and it's always denoted as fighting several people. So it's always built, the systems for it are built to deal with multiple opponent situations. So it's always rules. When if you take ShivWorks stuff, they'll introduce you to the problem of monologue and the problem of dialogue. Basically, verbal stuff creates friction that slows down your reaction. So, for example, if I say, stop my hand when I touch your chest, and I walk up, relatively easy, but if I say, how'd you do today? Did you do pretty good today? Yeah. Did you have a good time? You enjoyed? Okay, yeah. Where'd you come from today? Where were you coming from? So, verbal friction and dialogue is real. We can demonstrate that. That means that when we engage with multiples, if I get into a dialogue, a normal fencing phrase, see you, Colin. If I get into a normal fencing phrase with somebody, that's what I would call a dialogue. We need to, at most, have one tempo and move on to the next person. This is why I like the term promiscuous combat. We don't engage long-term with people. We have quick one-night stands all around, because if you get too sunk into one person, you're probably gonna get got. So that's one piece of it. When we talk about armor, there's only a few places to effectively kill people instantly. Despite, we touch each other all over the body, but I don't know if people saw the machete fight in the DR where a guy actually got his hand lopped off and continued to fight, knocked a guy to the ground. He's handless, hacks this guy. They both wind up dead, right? So that's a real problem. We need to hit people very specifically. And also, armor is good. One of the nice things about armor too is that it leaves the stuff that shuts people off instantly tends to be open. Open-faced helmets were the most common form of helmet because I need to be able to see, hear, and shout orders. That's an important thing in like battlefield combat, right? And then the final constraint, the presence of missile weapons means you need to always displace your center of mass. So I can't stay right here and fence even against multiples, because that means somebody can walk up behind me from a distance and chuck a javelin into my back, right? But if I am consistently changing the position of my body, you have to track that and either time it to hit me when I'm where I'm lined up, or when you throw, I get kind of a passive buff of, if I'm always displacing, there's a better chance that you're gonna throw into empty air that I was just occupying. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so what we're gonna do today in a practical sense is actually look at Fiore sword in one hand. I'm gonna give you a single action from each guard. You're gonna get an attack and a defense. And we're gonna look at the footwork of volta stabile, mezzovolta, tutta-volta. And we're gonna integrate our stuff with kind of active sparring games. I wanna keep it a conversational pace, but we're gonna get into it. So, grab you a weapon. We're gonna go to the cutting guard. Take your kind of outside saber parry, and just lift it up a little bit. Your head's fully covered. I want a little bit of a slant to it, not to get too specific. This way, and I want your left foot forward. This is your cutting guard. Your actions from here, defensively, I want you to shift a little to your right and stamp down. And now keep your left foot forward. You're in posta breve, or the thrusting guard. We'll call it thrusting guard for today. Thrusting guard, hand is near. If I extend my point too far out here and this cut is coming, it's a long distance for it to come back. In all of these, I want your weapon pretty close to your body. Cutting guard, thrusting guard. When you have your cutting guard, I stamp down and shift off to the side, or I cut, and especially cut on the pass. When I'm in my thrusting guard, if anything comes in, so give me a nice slow thrust. Yeah, put it in. I want you to displace your body, and I want you to move to the cutting guard. And obviously there's a good riposte from there. My thrust from here is to just launch. Okay, direct thrust or circle, and then do whatever you want to do, because you're now in the cutting guard. Does that make sense to everybody? And then our final one is, so we're gonna pick a direction to be our front. I'm gonna make it this way, pick a direction to be your front, and that's where your left foot is. Cutting guard, thrusting guard. Drop the tip, look behind you. Congrats, you've arrived at the posta di coda lunga, the long tail guard. There's only one action from this. It's the same action to attack or defend, and that is to flip the false edge across and thrust. That's it, nothing fancy. If I'm in my left lead guard and I thrust and cut, I move to coda lunga. I'm in my left lead guard, cutting guard, I throw a cut, I do it on a pass, I move to coda lunga. Does this make sense to everybody? So you only have 3 positions. Keep it simple. So now we're gonna take a look at volta stabile and get our first little bit of automaticity. So I want you to go to the thrusting guard. I want you to lift to the cutting guard. And when I do a volta stabile, a stable turn, I want you to do it on your heels. You've often seen this sort of thing. I would note that you've got a foot length of lever torquing your knee and torquing your ankle. You twist your ankle in public combat, you're probably dead. We can agree on that, or does that need to be justified? Cool. So instead, I want you to think, always have the rear foot off the ground, weight this foot. When I drop my heel, I turn, and I put my weight, once again, I take all my weight off the rear foot, and I'm on the front. Okay? So I have in front and behind on one side. Now the automaticity I'm gonna give you is to beat with coda lunga, turn back, and I can drop the tip if I need to thrust, but just work this cycle. And play with it. This is about you finding your pathway through those 3 things, not under pressure, okay? So explore that and the directions to either side. Give me like another minute. Once you feel comfortable with this thing, do whatever you want. I just need you to constantly move your center of gravity. You can throw cuts and thrusts, but understand that you're moving between basically 3 positions: a cutting guard, a thrusting guard, and a defensive guard. What?
Why left foot?
A little bit of artificiality, I think largely because it predisposes you to explosive passes. So this is medieval, right? This is out of Fiore. Oh, the question was, why left foot forward? Why not right foot forward? Right foot forward is obviously very optimal for 1v1. When I go left foot forward, what I wind up earning from that is, well, actually, technically you're right foot forward here. Yeah. Yeah, so we're gonna start you, because the positions are drawn left foot forward, but the whole point of this is we have in front and behind on one side. I wanna note an additional point. In the very least, you have front and behind, but you also have a whole 180-degree arc here. So if I engage with him and I switch, I can just do a 90-degree change. Does that make sense to people? Good question.
So I have 2 attackers. I'm being coached by my 2 attackers. They can go anywhere in this 180-degree arc. They're not allowed to go behind me yet. So I need to be doing my authenticity to see what each person is doing, and they're going to attack in order. I'll get this right. If I single attack from this person, I'll deal with it however I want to deal with it. I'm not allowed to attack first just yet. And then Dionysus will attack me. The amount of pressure we're looking for is basically 80-20. So 80-20 split of my success and my failure. I'm going to get touched. There are 2 people now. Right? So now give us a little bit of space to and you 2 gentlemen attack me in first. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And you can move. You also don't have to wait for me to fully turn. So if my back is turned at any point in time, during the drill or during the evolution,
you get one flush in there.
my back is turned. So this drill makes sense. We have 2 enemies. You're mostly fixed in front and behind, and they're taking turns, Kung Fu movie style, launching attacks at you. Make sense? Okay.
This one more clarification about what can we do to the back of this person.
Oh, so Dionysus, here are 2 questions. The question was what clarification on what we can do to somebody's back. If the other person has their back to you, we're just going to poke them to prove that you can. Okay. What we don't need to do is not everybody's got to go cruising, so I don't want chops coming in back.
Keep it to about a conversational speed. If you're not able to continue talking to each other through it, we're going a little too hard, just to start.
Can I begin in the middle?
Your success is going to feel very artificial because you should not be standing between 2 people like this. But we're starting you here so you can kind of get a sense of the worst case, and then we'll give you tools to do better. Excellent. Yeah, don't move your feet, Andrew, not just yet. I want you fixed-footed, because it sucks. Yes, good. Good flipping of the point. Okay, switch the... let me go ahead and give you the next drill then. So the next drill, they are now allowed to vary their timing. So I'm still fixed, but my opponents can, maybe it's one then the other, maybe it's one person attacks twice. I don't get the same affordance of knowing who's coming next. It's about to get shittier. You still can't move your feet, okay? It will be shitty and then we'll make it better. So give me another round, keep it conversational speed. You should be able to talk. That's as fast as I want you going, okay? Let's go ahead and rotate. Yeah. Pause, pause, pause. Dionysus, let me recommend switching your feet out like this. And actually, let me get in on this round. You guys are coaching me. Hold. I think we already have recorded. All right, here's your next iteration. Now the attackers can vary their timing. Maybe it's not one person and then the other person. Now it's maybe one person goes twice in a row. There's a little switching back and forth, and then another person goes twice in a row, 3 times in a row. But you're gonna vary who's attacking now. That we're gonna do is I'm gonna allow the defender, the person being coached, you get to move. Where do I wanna move? Can I get a person in front and behind me? We're on this 180. Okay, so right now, I have to traverse the largest amount of distance to deal to either side, right? There's a medieval game, the game of the little owl, where they had little kids like stand like this on top of somebody else's foot, and then that person would just like the 2 people on the outside would slap the shit out of the person in the middle, and it was to work this double line of direction moving between the 2, right? This is a shit show. You cannot win this. So how do we make it less shitty? Number 1, just don't be in between them. Simply by moving backwards a little bit, picture 2 lines from my center to each of them. Right now, that is a straight line. As I begin to move backwards, now there's an angle between those 2 lines. Do we see that? As I go really far back, I can start to get it down into like the 90-degree territory. What we want is a 45. So how do I achieve a 45? I'm gonna go back into the middle to make it a little easier for me to do it. I know Kieran's really scary, so fuck that. I'm gonna go this side, and I'm gonna try to work towards, now pause. Now I have a 45-degree angle of incidence. Do people see this? Here? Here. This is easier. I can sweep across both people as needed. Does that make sense? So now we're gonna repeat the drill, but you in the middle are allowed to move. When we move, I want you to take a large number of small steps. That's it. I don't care where or how you arc. When I'm in the middle and I don't wanna be there, I wanna take a number of small steps and I wanna arc until I'm getting a smaller angle of incidence between my attackers. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm also gonna go ahead and jump the queue. You are allowed to launch your attacks now as the defender. So if I'm in the middle, I was gonna do a longer progression, but we're all tired, so we're just gonna go straight into it. If I wanna move to Kieran's side, I might lance this and cut at him and move. Now I have a smaller angle of incidence. So basically we're gonna spar where 2 people are coaching the 3rd person. 3rd person, get out from the middle of them. Note that when I make a passing step, I change my in front and behind on one side, right? Do we see how that works as well? So when I scoot out, if I put my back this way, I've got in front and behind, but it's on this side. And that's not necessarily useful. If I mezzovolta, now it's in front and behind on this side. And I can figure out my so set your feet. You need to always put the side where you can fight in front and behind. Don't put your back to them, is the easiest way to put that, right? Okay, try to keep it conversational. I'm going to demo, and let's keep it so that both of us, all of us, can have a conversation while we're moving.
How'd you enjoy the tournament? I mean, I can come better. Yeah, there we go. Now we see what's the problem with grappling in this context?
One of the problems is wrestling. I can't get caught up in wrestling because then somebody will run up behind me and stab me. When we don't have long manual weapons, wrestling is actually much more optimal because we're controlling limbs. There's a whole thing there, but really avoid wrestling like I did at the end. You can see it did not work out well. Okay, so try to keep that conversational pace. Person in the middle is gonna get gassed a little bit on it, and then give me like maybe 20, 30 seconds and switch. Arc out, make a smaller angle, work between them, and go from there. Capture in the other person who's in the middle like that. How'd that feel?
The corner was like, it was comfier than being in the middle, but not being able to constantly walk back.
Oh, because you know that there's nobody behind you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very real and very useful.
If your blade work is, I mean, this was just conversational, but that felt a lot more doable.
Yeah. Now, consider missile weapons. What happens if a third person walks up and chucks a weapon at you?
Do they want to kill their friends or not?
So, in terms of your positioning, this is where stacking people is really useful. Stacking people, which is a deeper tactic. The idea that I'll move to the end of the line and then I'll push people down that line into each other. Everybody behind the guy I'm pushing now has to risk fucking up their friend to get to me. Or I can push. Let me go ahead and give the kind of useful tip.
Sure.
I want you to set up your arc and get it so where there's a smaller angle of incidence.
Yep.
And then whoever seems to be, yeah, I'll go now, I want you to launch on them. So the idea is that if Kieran's about to come at me, if I'm dealing on you, I'm gonna spring it at Kieran, watch them, get your distancing, and then don't look at anybody. I want you to kind of like zone out a little bit in terms of your eyes, and whoever begins to step towards you, spring on them.
Okay, so don't feint with the eyes, essentially.
Don't even, no, you just don't look at anything. If I look at Kieran and I'm focusing on Kieran's fencing actions, I'm not seeing what you're doing.
Okay, got it.
But if I zone out and just kind of look in the middle distance, right, I can see what each person is doing, yeah, with good clarity. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Connect all of your, don't use the center of your eyes, use your peripheral vision, don't look at anything in particular, launch on whoever seems to be approaching.
Okay.
That's the play, okay? The concept, this has been a little chaotic, I know. We're at the end of the tournament, nobody's fresh, so thank you for kind of tolerating this. The final evolution might actually be a little easier than the 2-on-1 drilling, and it's gonna go this way. So an evolution is a validation of the day's training, and what we need to do is validate the training in a context where you get enough signal to get something useful out of it. If I just throw 3 people at you, you're not gonna get anything useful out of it. That's like the big mass melees where there's no tactics or forethought, right? So what we're gonna do is there's gonna be one person that you're gonna square up with. I'm going to be holding the dart thrower and the other person by their elbow. I'm going to release them from a position and at a time that you don't know about. So that means you need to be checking your surroundings, even as you engage with the one person. That means you need to consider the possibility that a second person is going to join the fray. It may happen quickly. It may be delayed, and you actually, the person who you are fencing, if I get hit square in the center of the face, or I get cut in the head, or I get cut in the arms a handful of times, I want you to call yourself dead when you feel sufficiently fucked up that maybe you're not going to continue engaging. Okay? This is a bit of a play. This is a role play action. But it's hopefully going to give you the opportunity to experience some multiples on one in a way where you walk away and can consider your performance and consider how you might improve it for next time. Does that make sense? You don't win an evolution, you get fucked up the least. Okay? There will be a person with a dart. They're going to take one throw at you. They might hit your buddy. If I'm working on somebody as one of the bad guys and I eat the javelin to the back, go ahead, you're dead. Go ahead and call it. Okay? If it gets down to where the other two people are dead and the javelin thrower's coming, just because we're inside, I'm going to call it. Because I don't want you to have to beat the javelin and then launch it into a window or anything. Okay? Does it make sense what we're going to do?
So the dark javelin, that's those red ones?
Yep. So just keep displacing. The idea is that, and it'll happen like with you where you got fixed in the corner and somebody else got fixed in a corner over here. If you get fixed and the other person can get a line, they might throw a dart at you. So you need to continually displace, right?
So the other person doesn't move.
No, you can go wherever. As the person that's the focus of the evolution, you're going to have opposing forces. You're going to have one bad guy who can only cut. You're going to have one bad guy who can only thrust, and there will be a dart thrower. And I will release them to create different situations for you. Does that make sense to everybody? Also, I didn't explain that part because I'm also at the end of a tournament. One person is only allowed to be in this cutting guard and launch a cut.
The same cut or
Any cut. I can throw a backhand, I can throw a forehand, I can wing. But I want one person cutting, and then the other person is going to be a dedicated thruster. All you're allowed to do is stab people. So again, I'm trying to limit variables so that you can get something useful out of this. Does that make sense? Do we feel okay about this?
Yeah, it goes on.
I wonder if maybe I got one of those super fancy ones like would have no draw with.
When the javelin is allowed to go.
With it. Yeah. Also like, they have no fucking requirement. And I got through the whole thing and I thought of the cafe with the, when he complained. After he complained, I switched to the king. I switched to the king, and then the second I fence somebody, I put a set in it immediately, changing like the whole list. And I got in after like putting them on.
Who would?
And then it was like, alright, we're going to defense, and I don't even know about it.
Crazy for this. You would love this.
I had first Boar's Tooth I went to. I can give you if he says so. My kicker's not even playing.
You know, some Lord of the Rings discussion.
I assume it's true for your AFC for Super Bowl prediction.
Yes. I want the three-piece. I want the coveted three-piece.
I don't remember who I said. It wouldn't have been the Chiefs, though. Just by
Well,
So let's do a quick debrief. Is fighting against multiple people hard?
Yes.
What helps you die less?
Running away.
Fucking moving. Armor. Give me armor. I'm way happier doing this, and we could do that as an evolution later.
Not focusing on anybody.
Not focusing on anybody. Did anybody feel particularly good about their performance?
No.
I had one run that I felt pretty okay about. You know, I got dinged, certainly, but I'm probably alive. That's not bad. Being alive is the thing. If you start looking at the different manuals, and this is where what I want to invite you now to do is consider multiple lines, if you're a Fioreist especially. If I stand in breve for the sword and armor, and I just turn my head to this side, I'm now in vera croce, but the line of direction has changed 90 degrees. Does this make sense to people? Movement between the guards can be as small as just turning your head, okay? But we have to fight in the round against multiples.
What's the translation of vera croce?
Vera croce is the true cross. I think it's the true cross because it can intersect anything on this whole 180 degree arc. So let's see, any other feedback? I need to do we need a more consistent progression. I know that we kind of crashed through material today, and we need to do a little better job of, by we I mean me, defining the evolution a little better. We hit a point where it seemed fun though. Did you have a thought?
I was gonna say, because like one thing that you mentioned is that one of the big differences between us on the salt and them in the streets was the footing.
Yep.
So maybe in some further evolution, if you're on like linoleum, you could have people like try and fence the socks or something. Because it felt like, because I had so much traction in my heels, it felt better just to rotate on the ball than to drop.
So another classic one. I think we'll wind up doing this in a field if people are interested in doing another day like this. What we're going to look at is they had hobnail boots. All the stuff from like Decoven Concord people about slippery shoes in armor especially, utter bullshit. They had hobnail boots, they would have worn them. What you're going to find though when you go into the grass is twisting on your toes like that is going to start feeling really bad when you have tread. And I think actually if you start looking at some of those accent hobnails, you'll see that the cleat part goes to the midfoot and then the heel tends to actually be free of nails, which I think is supportive of this like switch hop way of kind of moving. Any other notes from people? How did you enjoy this? Was this fun or would you maybe do a different thing?
This is really fun. I was just gonna say, I was a little bit worried when we started like taking up space, so defining the ring and the bounds of the area might be helpful.
Yeah.
I always felt a smaller sword would do better. You lose distance, but you maybe. I almost felt that the shorter sword might do a little better than this. You lose distance obviously, but you gain mobility, and when you close, it's more maneuverable, which you need to do.
Yeah, so you'll find that when you go back and look at medieval swords, earlier, more open field battle type weapons tend to be like a 27-inch blade length, 27 to 32, even on long swords. That's interesting, right? They're clearly bad for the tournament context. You get got by people with longer swords, but what about the context changing makes certain tools more optimal than others? Okay. That's all I have unless anybody's got some final thoughts. Thank you for doing this experiment with me today. Hope you enjoyed it.
Because otherwise I have to...